Hello, friends. Good to be with you on the sixth Sunday of Easter. My name's Jason Smith. It's good to be with you again in spirit as we are continuing to not be with each other in physical space. It's again good to share this time of devotional, and I hope that it has been a meaningful time. I'm going to let you know that in the future, we are hoping to have a more interactive type of experience using a platform that we'll explain in an email a little later on, but the Zoom platform that we hope to have being used on a Sunday morning. So I'll have more details to explain to you this upcoming week, but I wanted to inform you of that so that you were aware that we're going to try and move toward that platform and launch it this Sunday, May 24th. Again, the details will be forthcoming, but this May 24th will have a little bit different experience. I'll still be on video, but we're hoping to incorporate some music, and we're hoping to incorporate some interactive time as well. And so do look for that email coming up this upcoming week. And as always, we pray for the members of our church community on our prayer list, for John Hobgood, for Dick Rudolph, for Christy McEnany, for Bill and Ruby Mertens, for Lisa Spear, for Ryan Hallaby and Catherine Hallaby. So please join me in prayer this week, in praying for them, in praying for our world, our community, in praying for the many people who are affected by the economy, in praying for a deeper love right now to fill all of our hearts as we continue to navigate this time of pandemic. So I do want us to give a word of thanks to all of you who have continued to support us financially with your tithes and with your offerings. We are grateful for you to be able to keep the ministry and presence of First Presbyterian Church going on here in this community. And so thank you for that. We are happy to be here and hopeful that we might be able to again one day, we don't know when, but again one day, return in each other's presence and be able to be with each other and truly be a physical embodiment of a community that follows Jesus Christ. Right now we are a virtual community, a spiritual community connected by phone calls, connected by video messaging, connected by seeing faces on a screen through these video calls, and so it's a bit different. I'll say that the session met this past week where we came to the decision about the more interactive worship, and it was so good. It was so nourishing for me to be able to see the faces of our church community, to be able to see the faces of session members, and to be nourished, to be filled by their presence. Hopefully we can begin to create that even more and be able to create more opportunities for that. But I just wanted to tell you how meaningful it was for me to be with them the other day. Continue to be in touch with me about any pastoral needs. Many of you have contacted me, and I look forward to being able to engage with you in a more interactive format very soon. Well, our gospel text this morning is from John chapter 14. It's a continuation of John chapter 14 from last week when Philip was asking where the way was. I don't know. Well, I am the way, Jesus says, and the truth and the life. This is a continuation of that conversation just after. And so Jesus then says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you will also live. On that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. Those who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. And those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jesus says, I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. Well, this week as I was studying the text and rereading the terms advocate and children of God and orphaned and trying to understand the meaning in this text, I couldn't help but keep thinking of our most recent meaningful experience as a family. That was of our time being in Colombia a few months ago as we picked up our kids. Myra and I spent 3 weeks in Colombia during the finalization of our adoption process for our kids Margie and Santi, and it has been a very long year of waiting, a very long year of hoping, a very long year of praying, of trying to keep God's commandment of love, and trying to trust in the Spirit of truth. It hadn't been easy always, but we've tried our best. And when we were there, when we finally made it to Colombia, we were there for 3 weeks, which seemed pretty long at the time, 3 weeks of doctor's visits, visits with social workers, and visits to embassies with our kids. And in the myriad of appointments was the very special moment that our children became ours in the eyes of the law, officially, which happened to be February 14th, Valentine's Day 2020. On this day, we spent much of our time with advocates, with the children's lawyer and social worker who served as our voice, who served as our advocates during this procedure. Now, the lawyer's name was Dr. Polo. He was a tall man, 6'5", maybe, probably in his early 60s, and he'd been an adoption advocate for 20 years. And our social worker's name was Camila Ariza. She was with us on every visit, on our visits with judges and social service workers that were by our side. They were both by our side, advocating for the case of these 2 children that they really didn't even know very well. But they were advocating for us to become a family, to become grounded in each other's love. Camila, the social worker, said that Dr. Polo was a special man before we met him. She said he walked with his clients through every step of the legal process of their adoptions, just as she walked with us through many of our steps. And he and her both walked with us through a very complicated process. In Colombia, adoption-related cases were tried not in Bogota, the capital city, but they were tried in, maybe not tried, but they were heard by a judge in a city outside of Bogota, in the town of La Mesa. As the crow flies, La Mesa is only about 25 miles away, but on the curvy roads and down the mountains, past, after you get out of the thick traffic of Bogota, thickest I have ever seen, it was about a 2-hour journey. And for us, it was a long journey because we have a child who has severe car sickness, and so not a fun journey with the plastic bags and all. And so finally, though, at the end of this journey, we were about 2 weeks in to our process, and we could see light at the end of the tunnel. After this visit, we were pretty much home free to return to the United States, to be in the next part of our stories, our journey with them. The disciples, too, were at the very end of their journey that night with Jesus. They may not have known that their leader would be leaving them, but they were indeed very close to beginning a new chapter in their lives in this time. They wouldn't know that Jesus would not be physically enfleshed with them, and they were beginning to believe that they may be on their own forever. Last week we read a little earlier on that night, Jesus was to be betrayed, that after supper and the foot washing, that Philip asks Jesus to show them the way. And Jesus responds with, well, I am the way and the truth and the life. Now this comment possibly further perplexes them and confuses them. It possibly gives them some kind of comfort that they need. And just after this moment, we come to our text for today, when Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. When I was in high school, I was part of an ecumenical choir. It's a choir composed of youth from various churches and faith traditions. And as a part of our repertoire one year, I can't remember when, we sang Thomas Tallis's If Ye Loved Me. For any more other music nerds out there, this is a beautiful choral work from the 17th century. It's a part that stuck so deeply with me that I can still remember the bass part. It's a part based off of Jesus' words, if ye love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth. And so Tallis's composition was demonstrating the musical concept of homophony. We're getting deep into musical theory at this point, and I didn't know how deep I wanted to go. But homophony is when multiple voices move in different directions. They're not all together going high or low. Some of them are going low while others are high, and then they're crossing each other. But they create a rich musical texture. Now, this piece is our offertory today, and I encourage you to go on the YouTubes and to listen to it, to experience this piece, Jesus' words as music. Because the voices are seemingly moving in different directions, yet they somehow guide us to the same feeling. They're guided by the same words. It seems as though the same voice and the same spirit is present in the music. Earlier on this fateful night, Jesus shares with the disciples what was to be the new commandment that was to guide them and to move them through their lives with the help of the Spirit. I give you a new commandment that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. Jesus says that he would pray to Creator God for another advocate to dwell among humanity, an advocate that would swirl and spiral through our lives, sometimes in the background, sometimes in the foreground, serving as our advocate. Now, we might think of an advocate as some type of a counselor in court, perhaps, or someone to speak on our behalf. And in fact, the translation today says the Father or the Creator will give humanity an advocate, or as the King James Version says, a comforter. The Greek word used is parakletos, which means the one who will plead another's cause with one, an intercessor. This paraclete, or this spirit of truth, grounded in all that is right and hopeful and loving, will guide our paths. And Jesus invites the disciples to continue to follow him by practicing this commandment of love in the world, even when he's not physically there. And we shouldn't be afraid if we don't have the words or the guidance or the plans, for the advocate will help us to find them. Or the advocate will speak and guide us on our behalf. Well, back in La Mesa, Colombia, Myra, Margie, Santi, and I were to appear before the judge on a Friday morning, Valentine's Day, February 14th, after a period of about 5 days of spending in La Mesa. And on this day, we were told it was pretty much just a formality. The judge would sign the papers, and we would be done. Camilla, the social worker, was with us that morning, arrived and informed us that the adoption lawyers usually don't make the 2-hour journey outside Bogota to La Mesa, just for this formality. But she reminded us that Dr. Polo would come every time. He would come every time a family was adopting, to be there when the judge signed the papers and pronounced us a family. And this was unusual for adoption lawyers to do this. He wanted to be there with families. Now, when Friday came, after these 5 days together, we did go to the courthouse with Camilla, the social worker, with Dr. Polo, and we sat in the waiting room, only to discover some very interesting news. The judge was out of town. And ironically, I'm saying that, but ironically, I'm going to say, Alanis Morissette, the judge was at a conference that was held at our children's adoption center in Bogota, the place that they had lived for months and months before we had adopted them, almost a year. That's where the judge was. We had taken our kids from that spot to La Mesa to go to the judge, and the judge has gone to that spot. And so, we were not in the same place where the judge was, and we worried. Upon hearing this, our advocate, Dr. Polo, who was calm, and our advocate, Camilla, who was trying to reassure us, said, "Oh, no problem. We can just go down the street to another office to sign one set of the forms, and the judge, a notary, will sign them there. And then a judge would sign the other forms next week, so don't worry." So in this situation, if everything goes right with the fingers crossed and the toes crossed and everything crossed, we were about 3 or 4 days away from literally getting on a plane for the U.S. and coming home. Dr. Polo went and got the car, and he said, "See you in a few minutes. I'll have the car. I have to take a phone call, but you all can walk down with Camilla." And Camilla walked down with us to the office. We felt pretty vulnerable at that point. We were just as unaware of the process of our own children. Our own kids were asking us questions that we did not know the answers to, and we kept asking Camilla these same questions. What is going on? What's happening to us? Throughout the Gospel of John, the readers are reminded that they are also in a vulnerable state. They too are children of God, and the references in this gospel are many. There are actually 6 references in the Gospel of John that we, humanity, are children of God. Now, if you want to know if that's a lot, it is a lot, because in the other 3 Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, there are only 2 references to children of God in all 3 of them. But John wants to emphasize to us that at times we are vulnerable. At times we human beings can become overwhelmed with our fear, and at times we can feel so alone. And Jesus says to us to calm the fears of the disciples, to calm our own fears. Jesus says, "I will not leave you orphanos," in Greek, orphaned. "I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you." What reassurance that we are not alone, that we are not to be orphaned, that Christ will send the advocate, the Holy Spirit, to abide with us, to create communion between us and God as a family, as God's children. Camilla held our kids' hands as we walked together to the notary's office, and in the office we stood in line with our kids and 50 other Colombian folks who were waiting to get business permits, licenses, and get things stamped of all sorts, and get all things kind of notarized. What do you do at a notary office? So we finally, after 20, 20 minutes, we approached the desk, and our social worker talked to the notary, explained our situation, a little bit about our adoption journey. Camilla was very good with people. She always had a smile. She was always warm and comforting, and was always had that sharp edge about trying to get things done efficiently as well. And she explained to this notary manager that, in past situations, the judge is not there. You, the notary manager, are legally able to just sign the form, and then later we can get it formalized by the judge after a few days. But if you could just sign this form, that would help us move forward. Well, as you can probably predict in this situation, things did not turn out like that. The notary office manager wasn't having any of it that day. I don't know if he didn't have his coffee or what happened, but he said, "That's not how things work in this office anymore, ma'am. You're going to need to go back to Bogota." Go back to Bogota on Monday when the office opens and start this process over. Now, I speak Spanish, so I could hear his words when he said them, and those words hit very hard. Those words almost sent us into panic mode because it had been a year and a half almost at this point that we had been waiting, and we were in the country, and so we didn't know what that meant. Could it be another 3 weeks? All I could imagine was lots more money and in hotels and in food, and much more cranky kids. 2 weeks with them. We thought that was a lot of time together. Now we're getting to spend a lot more time together. All of that missed work was just really weighing on us. And now we were told it could be longer than that. We were praying that this was not the case. We were praying for the Lord to give us advocates at that moment. So Camilla, the 35-year-old social worker who noticed she could not get anywhere with this notary manager. There may have been some machismo going on, but she could not get anywhere with this notary manager. She said, Dr. Polo, she called her phone, picked up the phone, called Dr. Polo and said, "They are not budging. Could you come over here? They're telling us it's going to be weeks. They're saying it's not going to work." Just a few minutes later, our other advocate walked through the door. The tall man with his satchel in hand, he approached the desk, and he spoke with the notary manager for a few minutes. And then he looked over at me and Myra and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Smith-Hauser, why don't you go and get the kids a Coke? Why don't you go grab some empanadas? Just go grab a little snack. It's a little before lunch. Come back in about an hour. Around 11:30, we'll talk to the notary manager," he said, motioning to Camilla. So we took his advice. I was in need of some sort of energy at that point. All of us were. We went to a place down the street that sold Cokes and chips. We got some nice hot empanadas, these breaded corn cakes with meat filling that are fried in hot grease, that are very much soul food in so many senses of the way of the word. And we sat there at this little plastic table and drank Cokes, although we may have needed something stronger, but we drank Cokes and ate this food and hoped and prayed together. When we returned to the office a few minutes later, sweating from the heat, but also sweating that we didn't have to start this process over again, Dr. Polo and Camilla were standing with the notary manager, and he was signing our papers. They both gave us a wink as we sat down, and Camilla, our social worker, said, "We did it. I won't tell you how we did it, but we got him to sign the papers. You're just a few days away from going home." We couldn't have been filled more profoundly with love in that moment. We were overjoyed. And it seems like sometimes when we think that hope and love might be lost, when our dreams are crushed and bruised and barely make it, when we're facing tragedy and fear like no other, wondering If God will orphan us, we don't know where to turn. We don't know where to find the words. We don't know how to live. It seems like we are in the midst of one of those periods right now, collectively as humanity. But I truly believe, friends, that with the help of the Advocate, with the help and the voice of the Spirit of truth who swirls around us, speaking on our behalf, we are, in the end, guided toward love. If we practice love, Jesus' commandments, and if we let ourselves rest in the love of our Creator, Jesus' love for us will shine even brighter and more deeply around us. Now, all of these sentences, I was rereading them, sound very redundant. Sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over. But in fact, that's what the text says in verse 21. Jesus says, "They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. And those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them." The lines between who loves in this sentence and who is loved intentionally seem to melt into each other. They're blurry in a way in which we don't know where the love comes from or where it goes, but we know that it seems not to stop. With our hearts turned to love and with the guiding voice and wisdom of the Spirit of truth, we don't know where God's love ends. We don't know where ours begins. With the help of the indwelling of the Spirit, which deeply abides in our being, love becomes infinite, eternal, an exponential source of power. And right now, I don't know about you, but I need some energy. I need some power. I need to tap into something that is infinite. Right now, we're continuing to navigate these uncharted waters, completely in the dark about what next year will bring. We barely know enough about next month and next week. I wish I could tell you when the church was going to be filled again with your faces and your presence, but I do not know. Friends, we have to just keep trusting the wisdom and the voice of the Spirit of truth, listening hard to try and find that presence. And in the midst of this pandemic, all we can do is lean into Jesus' commandment to love one another as best we can. We might feel alone in our houses, but friends, know this: the Advocate is with us, and the love that we tap into is a bottomless source of life that we will have forever. Let us take advantage of this week and into the future. Friends, it was 3 months ago this past Friday that Myra, Margie, Santi, and I officially became a family on Valentine's Day, on the day of love. And amid the chaos and sleeplessness and the drama and the emotions in our house of the past few months, I can tell you that there is also profound love. We practice the commandment of love as best we can right now, and we try to share in the love that is offered to us. And our advocates, Camilla and Dr. Polo, well, they will be with us long throughout the time of us as a family, as long as we are a family, every day, forever. Because we have them to thank for our being together, for our coming together. We have them to thank for not leaving all of us orphans from one another. We have them to thank for this love that we share. Jesus says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. Thanks be to God. Amen. Thank you, friends. It's been good to be with you in this format for the past few weeks, and you will be receiving an email in the next week about how we will be meeting, hopefully in a more interactive virtual setting in the future. But for now, peace be with you. I hope you will continue to pray for each other on this journey. And please remember that if you love Jesus, you will keep his commandments, and he will ask the Father, and the Father will give us an advocate to be with us forever, the Spirit of truth. Peace be with you, friends. Take care.